So without further ado, I am happy to welcome all of you to our first episode of Let's Talk About It. Why I chose this very emotional, very difficult, nasty, inappropriate topic for our first episode, right? Because it's awkward. It makes people feel very awkward. That's how I felt as a young woman who came to the States to study in 2006. When I started my master's in project management program at the George Washington University, luckily I was so happy I was in the international city where more or less people knew about Kazakhstan. And sometimes people will say, oh, yeah, I work there, or I'm married to a Kazakh woman, and things like that. And what's funny is that there were still some people at happy hours and places like even conferences that the first thing they would say when I introduce myself that I am Anar Umurzakova and I'm from Kazakhstan, they would ask me, oh, have you seen Borat? And they would laugh. And this is exactly the awkwardness and the thing that I avoided as a young woman. Because after seeing the trailer, I deemed it inappropriate for myself. I compared it to pornography, but definitely it made me feel very uncomfortable. And you can imagine how it may have affected my career. I just felt that this person is not enough, or is not maybe someone who I want to associate with. And I closed that door. So I want to first introduce you to our first speaker, Nadia Jiksimbayeva. She has a PhD in organizational behavior, and she has a BA in psychology. And she can definitely tell us how it affects us psychologically. It's very similar to victims of assault who don't want to talk about it. It's easier for us through our angle of privilege to give the voice to people who don't want to talk about it, to give the people ability to express the shame that they felt that was imposed on them. So please, without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Nadia Jiksimbayeva.
Hi guys, so happy to connect for many years living in this country. So wonderful to connect. I can speak from two perspectives, one from kind of scientific point of view and one from personal point of view. The very first time I was called the Borat sister, I was in Frankfurt airport. I had my 1-year-old daughter with me, and I had a group of a bit rowdy American men boarding the plane with me towards the States. And they kept asking me where I'm from until they said, oh, Borat, that's a real country. And that was my first moment when they said, oh, you're Borat's sister, which naturally you can imagine that this became a label for quite a lot of people. So it became on one end a label, on another end, for me personally, of course, a sense of motivation. It's a reason why I didn't change my last name to a more easy to pronounce name of my husband, because I wanted to have an excuse, a reason to explain the history of my name, which is my grandfather's name. I'm a mixed ethnicity, and this is the Kazakh side of my family, that I wanted to carry it forward and keep it on my book covers and on my TEDx talks and everywhere else. But from point of view of the overall effect of this movie, I've since the movie had to listen and read a lot of interviews of Sacha Cohen to get a sense of what was his intent. And he's by any means an intelligent person, no judgment there. So it's not a lack of intelligence. He keeps speaking about this being a movie that is all about creating conversations and creating education. In reality, the effect of it became the excuse and the permission for people to use hate and judgment, and an easy way to prejudge somebody. I understand the intention was probably very reasonable. And if he chose a fictional country, as it's done very often, it probably was a method to expose some of our prejudices and some of our quick judgments that we make in reality. In this case, since he created a fictional experience but gave it a real name, it became a source, a name of a real country. It became a source of extreme attacks. And I have people all around the world who keeps reporting me how they were disregarded in terms of women mansplain continuously. So men were explaining how to do things because they're stupid women from Kazakhstan. How many people have been abused because of the experience and the attitudes they experienced because of this movie. So the intent might be clean. The reality, however, is that it became a very, very easy tool for judgment and discrimination against many people around the world. And if people with education, as you say, with privilege, I have tons of privilege. If I'm standing on my whatever privileges and with a lot of protection that I have around me, and I still experience that, I can only imagine how younger people who are just venturing outside of the country are experiencing this discrimination. So for me, there's no discussion, was that a comedy or was that an insult? It might have been an interesting intellectual exercise, but real human beings have been suffering because of it. When we are young and we experience any form of traumatic experience, we are faced with a traumatic experience, most of the time we simply don't have yet coping mechanisms. So what we do is we create a cover up for that wound. That wound never gets healed. We just create a band-aid and try to not step on that soft tissue ever again, which means we will avoid relationships that maybe would be good relationships, but since they smell and feel like that painful experience, we will avoid them. We will avoid jobs, opportunities, travel, adventures, because it feels and smells like that traumatic experience. And therefore, from having a palette of colors in our life, we suddenly shrinking our palette to very few colors, and we are robbing ourselves of opportunities and experiences because of that trauma. So of course, particularly for younger generation, this is a difficult experience because it forces them to always cover something up, a part of ourselves. And when your body covers something up, it spends significant amount of your energy on that cover up. So your brain energy on the unconscious level is actually, it's like, imagine your computer, it has a particular part of your battery always dedicated to the cover up. You don't even feel it, but you don't have a full access to your energy because your body is constantly trying to adjust and cover the traumatic experience.
Nadia, thank you so much, because I think it's very important to explain from a theory perspective before we get into real life situations. And today we're so lucky to have our young Kazakh lady, Ella. Please join us. Tell us about your experience, because you're the representatives of many, many young kids like Nadia's daughter and others who were actually born and raised in the US. You are American and you are Kazakh. Tell us about your experience and how you dealt with it. I'm sure it was not very easy for you.
Yeah, so my experiences with it have gone like way back to when I was really young. People tend to just delegitimize where I'm from, like my ethnic background. They're like, "Oh, Kazakhstan's not a real country," and they start quoting lines from Borat. So obviously, as a child, it was really confusing and disheartening. But now, as an older person, I think more people are educated about what Kazakhstan is, where it is, in college at least. But with the release of this new film, who knows what will happen? Like, I'm sure more school-aged children will be exposed to harassment and bullying just the same way that I was, and their ethnic background will be delegitimized just the same as me. So, we can only, expect more of this kind of behavior.
Me interject. Ella is my
Yes.
daughter. So when the yes, she's my girl.
Well, Dia Nurtaz is an amazing woman. She represents Kazakhstan in every way possible wherever she goes, and she brought real movies from Kazakhstan about real life in Kazakhstan. She
I made them too.
distribute them.
Some of the
She
movies.
made them. She was in them. Basically, Gohar is someone who should get comedy. She lives in LA. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, Ella was talking about her experiences, but of course she's in this kind of discussion, I think, Ella, you're participating for the first time, right? What
Yeah.
I remember, she was only 7 years old, and she'd come home telling me about the horrible jokes and the things that she had to deal with. She was in the fight once or twice, correct, Ella? Why don't you
Yes.
tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it was when I was really young. I think it was like Culture Day or something, which is just like a celebration of people's different ethnic backgrounds that they celebrate in elementary and middle school. And you dress up like the, traditional clothing for where you're from. And you tell people where you're from and you explain your background. And I think I dressed up in something traditionally Kazakh, and a girl came up to me and was like, "Oh, where are you from? Where's your dress from? Blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, I'm from Kazakhstan." And she was like, "What do you mean? That's not a real country." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And she's like, "No, it's not. Why are you lying to me? I don't like that you're lying to me. This is very telling of who you are as a person." Like, and then we just got into a fight over it. I'm like, "Listen, like, it's a real country. I don't know where you're getting your facts from." She's like, "No, you're using this like fake country that, is from the film Borat, and you're trying to just be an ass, basically." So obviously that was one of like several different fights I've had to be participant in, just to like defend the country that I'm from. It's just unfair that people have to go through that. So yeah.
It is unfair, and what is unfair is that it's systematic, because it's a repression of personalities to not talk about where you're from, to try and hide your identity. I want to introduce you to Yerdin Zikibai, artist and educator from Kazakhstan. And I'm interested in the work that you do with adoptive kids from Kazakhstan.
Yeah, thank you so much for this panel. I wasn't doing my bachelor's degree when the movie came out, so I was personally affected a lot but in a way I found some positivity as well, because before that there was a lot of sort of suspicion towards any country from Stan because of the war on terror, Afghanistan and Iraq war were going on. So I felt a lot more negativity in a way before Borat, but after Borat, you could all these jokes and everything. Again, because I have being a male, I think they weren't as harsh, and being a grown up, so I could sort of direct them towards education, towards educating people about that it's not a real portrayal, and about how it was shot in Romania and everything. And as Nadia told, also gave me a sense of motivation. I actually I got a lot more aggressive in terms of portraying my country, and like I would be like at every international event, like waving the flag, having this big stands with information about Kazakhstan. Like I would, some people would say back then it was too much, but again, you have to understand where I was coming from. Again, because I felt I had to explain
it's
so
never
much.
Too much, Evgen. It's okay.
I had to do so much work to destroy these misinformation that was all around me. So when this whole thing was going on, I actually read a press release from this group, Kazakh of the United States. It's a nonprofit organization that hosts cultural camps for Kazakh children in the United States. And I saw their press release saying that they were worried about the movie, and that the kids were affected by it because kids were watching TV like CNN and other news stations with the interviews, and they were seeing all this negativity. So that made me very antagonistic towards the movie, much more. And later on, I started volunteering with them, and I've been volunteering with this organization for 9 years now. And I heard a lot of stories from these kids similar to what Ella said, and that just made me again more passionate about doing all this work of education, of enlightenment about Kazakh history, culture.
Yes, could you share about your recent project, Wakastan, how you're trying to get people to talk about it instead of hiding it in their traumatic experiences?
Yeah, so I started this account, Wakanstan. Wakanstan. It's a play on the Wakanda. So it's essentially I did this little cartoon showing how a person was affected in 2006 and how they might be affected in 2020 because of the Borat. But then after discussing this issue with Gauhar and with other activists, with Tina, I realized that there needs to be more things done, because a lot of times when I tell things like I'm telling you how I heard all these stories, people are like, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything. You might be making them up." And I'm like, okay, like I need to actually get real people telling about these experiences, because when I say something, people they just don't believe it because they haven't experienced them themselves. They don't trust or they don't have the ability to empathize that somebody might have gone through something they personally didn't experience. So I had to do this call for people to contribute their stories, their testimonies, and I'm planning to release this during the premiere day to sort of have this conversation that is being hurtful to a lot of people.
I think Ella had something to add. Was that?
I wanted to add one thing. I think that this film does something quite unique that other films don't do. I'm talking about Borat and Borat 2, which is cultural erasure in a way. Like what I experienced as a child, that person that I was talking to didn't even think that our country was a real place. In a way, this film, this mockumentary, whatever you want to call it, is a form of erasing Kazakh identity in the post-colonial modern era. I think that makes it even more, in an insidious way, violent. Because it is actively erasing who we are as a people, especially in the minds of the West, which is important that we assert ourselves as a big world power in our own way. So just wanted to add that in.
May I add to that one?
Yeah, sure.
What really is amazing is this is how it, Yergan, remember you asked me, what does that feel like, right? What does that feel like? This is exactly how I feel. I feel like I'm cornered by a bunch of bullies who are making jokes and throwing them at me, and they're telling me to enjoy it and laugh with them. It's impossible. Of course, because this film is actually what is that is a selective racism, and we got to talk about it, because let's be open, they would never make this movie so obvious about any other nation. The reason why, and I'm going to repeat myself again and again, the reason why Kazakhstan is chosen for this harassment is because we're a completely underrepresented community. We're a small community throughout the world, but let's talk about the West, for example. I don't know how many of us are in Europe, but in the States is what, 50,000 people? We're a very, very small ethnic minority, and that makes it okay for the creators of those films to choose us as a target, to choose the name of our nation, name of our country.
And to add to that, I think it's at some level even more painful to recognize that they may not even consciously recognize that this might be of any issue. You read through the points that Sacha is making, and it's an incredible choice that he would not even consider ever choosing a fake country, that he would choose any country in the world to abuse in this way.
Nadia, darling, I'm sorry, I'm interjecting myself, but I really disagree. Because if you look at it very carefully at the Borat 1 movie, right? They have such incredible details, like the mean neighbor whose name was Tuyakbayev. That was at the time oppositioner to the then president Nazarbayev. There were details, I can't remember all of them, that make me absolutely sure that they know, and they know what they're doing. The reason why is because they, with the first one, they surely got away with it. They surely got away with that selective racism, right? And they're probably going to get away with it now. But they're in the wrong side of history. They
Okay, I
really
think
are.
Yarden wants to reply to that. Yes?
Yeah, the neighbor's first name was actually Nursultan, but his last name was, yeah, Tulyakbay. Was interesting.
Tuyobay.
But
I think it's a big mixer-upper. But again, the reason why I wanted this conversation to be open and honest, and I invited more guests that can legitimize what we're saying, because you see real TV shows where he is portrayed as a real Kazakh journalist. And that is very disturbing to me. If the movie had a disclaimer that this is not a real portrayal of a country, then maybe people wouldn't be so uneducated about it and wouldn't bully kids, real kids from Kazakhstan, saying that it's not a real country and they are liars. So unfortunately, the world we're living in, I was pressed to invite people with opposing views, or to invite people that are not Kazakh, to really give us the validation, even though we know for sure we don't need the validation. But we do in this society, in mass media, saying that, okay, a bunch of Kazakh people are offended, they don't have humor. So I want to introduce you to two people that I invited today and who agreed, and I'm very grateful for that, because there were people who didn't. There were people thinking it's too controversial to come and talk about it. So please welcome David Valera, is a person, a businessman who works in international cooperation field, and Rohit Talvar, who is actually from UK, where Sacha Cohen is from, but he was born and raised in London, and his parents are immigrants from India. Now he's a futurist, and he's published a lot of books. And I love this perspective, because he lives in the same continent where maybe such humor could be appropriate, or people would think like, oh, that's just art, where they're from. So Rohit, you could start, and David will continue later.
Hi. Well, the first thing I want to say is I totally understand why, as Kazakhs, you feel that this was targeted at you. But I think this was just a case of Sacha Baron Cohen choosing a country that very few people knew of and that wouldn't fight back. So it could just have easily have been Azerbaijan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. It was somewhere that most people didn't know. And then they did a lot of research to try and make it real. And that's why they used Kazakh names, and that's why they talked about things that Kazakh people in particular would recognize. Borat was actually a character in Sacha Baron Cohen's comedy show. He had a variety of characters, and this was back in the early 2000s. He would have little sketches with Borat in, and then he expanded it to a film. And at the time, because they were very short sketches, some people thought they were funny. I didn't. And to be honest, the first time I saw Borat, the film, was about 2 hours ago, because I never watched it. I just thought it was obscene to basically be so insulting to one nation, to one culture, and to create victims in that culture, because as Ella said, people didn't believe it was a real country, and people thought it was okay to laugh at it in the way that we did in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We had a lot of TV programs here, a lot of films that made fun of various races or people of certain colors. We thought we'd got rid of that in the 90s, and then things like this really set us back. And I grew up in London in the 60s and 70s. There was very obvious racism at the time, directed towards Asians in particular, and South Asians. And there was this term called Paki bashing, which basically meant people went around trying to beat up Asians. Now, Paki meant Pakistani, but it didn't really matter. They didn't check your nationality before they chased you or threw a brick at you. They just saw you as being the other of a certain color. And I think we're at a point now where, for me, this is very bad timing. I think if the first film had really challenged American culture, American ways of thinking, it would have been different. But having watched it today, I realized it was actually very light on highlighting issues in America and very heavy on making fun of Kazakhstan, Kazakhstani women, the way Kazakhstani men treat women, all sorts of things. And I do worry that this second film, I've only seen a few clips of it, and I saw that Jimmy Kimmel interview, and again, it just wasn't funny. But what it did was to portray Kazakh people as, or Borat as a representative. It portrayed them in a very bad light. And I hope that the film does a little bit more this time to highlight some of the issues in America, rather than just talk about Kazakhs again and point the finger of fun at Kazakhs. And I don't think I'm going to be right. I think it's going to do the same, and maybe it's going to take me 10 years to see the film again. But that kind of thing really just turns me off, and I think it diminishes humans. It creates a negative stereotype, and it becomes very easy to push that. As you say, there's only 50,000 Kazakhs in America. Very hard for you to fight back against the millions of people who've seen the film and think that they should make Kazakhstan and people from there an object of fun.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I think is another thing to think about for all of us. When he says he's a feminist, but bringing women into the Toronto Film Festival instead of the horses and him being on the vehicle, is that a good portrayal of women? This is another angle where it is completely unacceptable. And I think all women of all races should think about it. I want to give the mic to David Valera because of his tremendous work in promoting bilateral cooperation between Kazakhstan and the US, and really promoting cultural exchange. He's been investing so much into it.
Thank you very much, Anar. And I certainly appreciate getting an opportunity and a platform to speak amongst so many of you as one of the few non-Kazakhs in this discussion. Gia is a personal friend of mine. Ella, her daughter, is a bright, articulate young lady who I think, Gia has done a phenomenal job in raising. And the rest of my colleagues who are currently participating on this phone call, I have the utmost respect for the work you do. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I was born overseas. I've lived in Manhattan since I was 1. I had the good fortune of growing up in a diplomatic family. So I am heavily multicultural. My children are multicultural. And Kazakhstan was something that was put on the map for me when I was walking down Wall Street, and a young Kazakh student stopped me to ask me for directions, and me thinking I was this highly, well-rounded traveler, and it piqued my interest and also highlighted my level of ignorance, because in the United States and even throughout my travels, Kazakhstan and Central Asia was just not something that was put on the map. So naturally, in typical Kazakh way, we became friends. They were very welcoming, very friendly, very easy to talk to. And after about a year of conversation, I was invited to come to the country. When I landed, I just absolutely fell in love with it, the welcoming nature of the people and so forth. So after a number of years, I got tired of the Wall Street grind, founded a company called 4KZ, the number 4KZ. And the initiatives of the company were essentially to adopt diplomatic and socially impactful principles that would improve not only bilateral relations between the United States and Kazakhstan, but also, more importantly, educate the United States on Kazakhstan, and as well as contribute positively to the development and advancement of Kazakhstan as a country. What do I think about, this movie? I mean, look, as a lifelong New Yorker, as a lifelong American, I lost a brother in the Afghanistan war in 2012. He died in the line of duty. I'm as American as it gets. From the American perspective, I'm accustomed to, you know, countries and other parts, even of the U.S., making fun of New York and Americans. That's nothing new. I mean, you just develop a certain numbness to it, and you really, you know, sometimes laugh about it. But to now sort of isolate a nation and to victimize a nation who is still developing and finding its way in the international community, and to prey upon the ignorance of others' limited understanding of that part of the world, as we say in New York, it's just fucking buffoonery. And, you know, I'm more upset not with Sacha Baron Cohen. I'm more upset with the corporations here in the States, like Amazon, who subscribe to this shit, for the lack of a better word, and irresponsibly allow it to exploit and distort people's ignorance about a country that is vastly different than the way it's portrayed. And being in the entertainment business to a limited degree and having experience with it, there is nothing stopping Amazon from having a disclaimer either at the beginning of the film or at the end of the film saying, you know, this is a fictional movie, this is a fictional character, you know, made to strictly entertain. But to then allow this to run rampant and to promote it in a sense that individuals have sex with their daughters, are misogynistic, are you know, dismissive of women. I mean, it's a goddamn fucking outrage. And you know, when Anar asked me if I wanted to be on this, I said, look, if you want me to be on this, I'm going to be on this, but I'm not gonna sugarcoat this shit. You know, it's really highly, you know, frustrating, because I've spent the better 12 years of my life speaking at, you know, Harvard University. I hosted a class of 50 Harvard students on the Silk Road Initiative. I've educated Americans, and me as an American, the reason why I chose to work in Kazakhstan, not simply because I love the people, but because the big driver for me was every time I came here, people couldn't even pronounce the name. So the lack of understanding about that region really felt like a true calling for me, and almost a responsibility. Having developed the relationships, the friendships, the passion and the love that I have for that part of the world, and then to have to come here and deal with the fucking nonsense. It's just, it's outrageous, but you know, these conversations, I guess, are therapeutic, if nothing else. So I'm happy to get it off my chest.
Thank you, David. G and Nurtaz can share work that she's been doing with the Kazakh community to stop Amazon from participating in the repression of our cultural identity. And Aika Alemi is our fashion designer, multi-passionate intellectual, and a cultural ambassador from Kazakhstan. She can also share her experience of educating about this. In my opinion, it's not a real genocide, but it's a cultural genocide. Gia, you can start and Aika will add.
Okay, thanks, Anara. I wanted to address, first of all, what Rahid had said and what Anar, you've said before earlier. Yeah, you know, these guys are going around calling this a documentary. In some posts, they call it a mockumentary, which means, and we don't even need to prove that majority of people actually think that it's an accurate portrayal of Kazakhstan, correct? Because the movie was built on that, right? That's how it was shot, with the ignorant people, not bad people, just people who don't know who we are. Granted, it's our own fault, the fault of our government. They don't do any PR of the country. There's none. So what are we gonna do? I came here roughly 20 years ago, and I moved to Los Angeles, 17 years ago now? Something like that. And I came here was the one reason I wanted to represent our country. I wanted to tell our stories, and I've been making movies and I've been representing movies, so on and so forth. But to address what Anar was saying and David was saying, this thing with Amazon. Yeah, we've written a letter. We've written a letter that we're sending on behalf of, well, it's signed by me and also on behalf of Kazakh American Association in Washington, D.C. So it's an official letter where we basically is spilling out and pointing out how wrong it is that Amazon right now is releasing this film. And at the end of the letter, we are saying that they are on the wrong side of history. Because you know what? At some point before, racial discrimination, certain language was acceptable in media, widely acceptable. Now those movies are being taken out. You know, maybe the same thing will happen with this one. I don't know. I think it is our responsibility to speak for our community and to show the people who don't even understand that by the fact that they're supporting this film, they're actually also supporting things like, you know, harassment, racism, et cetera, et cetera. That's what they're doing. They're harassing ethnic minority. Ika and I had this, Ika actually invited me to be a guest on her Instagram live that happened yesterday. We spoke in Russian so we can reach a bigger audience. And that one was for the Kazakh people who we love with all of our hearts. And we basically were talking about this absolute need of unity right now for our people. We can criticize ourselves all we want, but right now we need unity. Right now we need to create successful campaign, and thank you, Yerden, for your fabulous work. The things that Yerden is doing is incredible. I really applaud you with all this stuff, and we'll always post and repost. And that's the thing that we need to work together right now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Anar, for creating this, and thank you for inviting us. Actually, I've been, since this news came out that the film is going to show, and I've been really stressed out, and I take it very personally. And I do not want to be liberal. I do not want to be, you know, falsely tolerant and falsely progressive and falsely advanced. I don't want to, you know, to pretend that this is just low comedy and it doesn't matter, because it does matter, because my people and my country, we're only 11 million ethnic Kazakhs all over the world, you know, about 9 million in Kazakhstan and 2 million outside Kazakhstan, including 50,000 in America. And for me, it's a very grave situation, because I've lived outside Kazakhstan for 20 years in Russia, in the States a little bit. And for me, when I was away from my land, the Kazakh people told me, "Oh, you know, you're not a patriot. You live outside." But I always felt that I am the ambassador of my country, and by looking at me, people judged what my country is like. And I always told the stories of how charming and amazing and beautiful and deep and profound the history and heritage and the culture and the nature and the character of the Kazakhs. And this movie just comes, it gets in my way, and it gets against my goals, my values, and my aspirations. And I'm not going to be silent. I'm going to speak up. And of course, it's a difficult time. It's a very grave time for us, but this challenge is also an opportunity for us to grow and to overcome. And we have overcome in our history. We have overcome a lot of difficulties, and our ancestors have fought for the honor and for the dignity of our nation. They fought very hard, and although we're very small in numbers, we're very strong in spirit. And I believe in Kazakh spirit, and we will continue it, and together we will overcome whatever the comedy comes out. It raises a lot of questions for us, that we have to be united, we have to speak up, we have to, both the government and the citizens, the people have to talk and tell the story of our nation. And as I like to quote the words from the national anthem, written by the great Shamshi Kaldayakov, which actually was because of Borat. There was a mocking situation in Kuwait after the first Borat came out during the international sport event. Instead of the national anthem, the amazing song by Shamshi, an odious soundtrack from the movie was played, and as if by accident. So this movie has caused and is causing and will cause a lot of damage. So we have to be strong. But I'd like to quote this national anthem, which in Kazakh sounds "Guleng bolup yegilemen yelim, zhireng bolup togilemen yelim," which means in Kazakh, I will translating for David and other non-Kazakh speaking participants. I will be the flower that will grow on your soil, and I will be the song that will poise over your land. And we all feel like that. We really love our country, and this sense of land, this sense of people, the yel, aul, jerem menem, my land is very strong in our culture, and it's in our blood, and it's not going to go away. So I believe that we will overcome, and for us, it's an opportunity to create the movement and create the unity and start this, what our government hasn't done. We shouldn't, blame each other who hasn't done and who has done. But it's an opportunity for us to work together towards creating a positive image and towards singing the song of our people. Because we are the link in the great chain of succession from our ancestors who are behind our back, the great people, the amazing personalities, and towards the future, and continuing this link for our children, for our grandchildren, that they carry this love towards our land and this awe that we all feel when we see from when landing, from being on the plane, landing and flying over Alatau mountains, we just tremble with awe and love. So I just want this to be a message of love.
We are definitely seeing how this is affecting everyone. But again, the issue here is, as a Kazakh American, I want the same rights. Everyone wants the same rights, like everyone who came to the States. The most important point here is that other people should not be lessening our experience and dismissing it as right or wrong, or you should laugh because it's a comedy. And that's the final thought from me. I think Yerdan and Gia wanted to say and add to this. Please.
Go ahead, Gia.
Yeah.
Thank you. Real quick, I just wanted to say that Yerdan was actually sending me articles, and I read them. And then I looked at Sacha Baron Cohen's posts and stuff on social media. Now he's trying to portray himself as like hero who is fighting, against the Republicans, against Trump, etc. But you know what? You're fighting while also victimizing ethnic minority. No, you're not liberal, Sacha Baron Cohen. You're really not. You're doing the exact same thing. to us. And that's not okay. Gideon, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think that's what Nadia was saying as well, that the movie is really trying to expose the prejudice in the society, but by the impact of that is also that it's becoming an excuse for prejudice. And what I was trying to say is that I think because again, like so many years passed since then, it's much easier to think about it a little more less emotionally. And I think the point is to be strategic, to understand like what should we do. And again, it's not, as Rohit and as David were saying, it's not something new in the West that there are ethnic jokes happening. And there were like back in the early 20th century, there was a Black African-American minstrel shows. In the 70s, there were police jokes, and all these groups fought for their right not to be misrepresented. And I think that's what we should do as well, to really fight and to spread awareness and just to be systematic about it, because I don't think we should feel that we're anything special. We're just like we're just the newcomers to the game. So, and as newcomers in a way, they thought it would be a fair game to prey upon us. And we need to prove that it's not fair game. And another thing I was also trying to do a little devil's advocate thing about our government not doing anything. I actually want to give props to Yerlan Idrisov. He was a Kazakh ambassador to the U.S. when I was in college here, and he was organizing a lot of great exhibitions in the museums, in the top museums in DC. He was doing concerts and all for free and he invited the whole public. And I think he really tried to do this damage control after Borat. And also there's a international TV station called Kazakh TV, which is also, they're trying to tell about Kazakh culture abroad in English language as well. I think they're starting translating Kyrgyz and Uzbek, so they're doing a lot of the regional outreach as well. So there are attempts to, and I think there was also some government sponsorship of Triple G and Dimash. So they're trying to the best of their abilities, I believe.
Yes, Yerden, thank you so much for that. However, I want to disagree with that to a certain extent, because we're newcomers to this game of bullying, but we're no newcomers to bullying at all. We've been bullied by the Russian Empire and the communist regime, that evil dictatorship that the US and UK and all the Western world condemns. However, by distributing this, you could call it propaganda, on Amazon Prime and all the other streaming services, and even official TV shows like Kimmel's, they're doing the same thing. And this is why we need to talk about it. So I want to give the few words to Adi from Copenhagen. He's actually our brightest young fellow from Kazakhstan who started the petition. It's been very successful worldwide. Tina, one of our Instagram blogger, was doing tremendous work to popularize it. So if you guys agree that Amazon should put at least a disclaimer or completely take out the film from this, please find Adi's petition and sign it. It's called Cancel Borat, and Adi will say a few words about it.
Yeah, thank you, Anar. I was just about to say that about the petition, that it was not aimed at actually prohibiting the movie or stopping it from actually broadcasting, but it was aimed at the people, at the Western society, to actually inform them that it is not okay to make fun of us. It is not okay to, as Gia said, to express the selective racism. And I think we cannot actually stop the Amazon industry from broadcasting the movie, because it's legally not possible. What we can do is actually informing the Western society that where actually, as people are hurt by this movie and affected in a large extent. And I think not many people understand how the American culture is actually affecting the global society. Like we in Europe are also affected by the American pop culture. Many like young people are following the American lifestyle, especially in such countries as Italy or Germany. It is very popular. And I think in these times, like in present days, xenophobia and bigotry are rising everywhere, like even in Scandinavia. And it is very important to actually inform people on such issues. I don't think we have to over victimize ourselves, like we're not that special. It could be any other country. It's not an issue of choosing this specific country, but it's an issue of inequality and xenophobia among the Western people, and we should actually talk about it more. And yeah, I think it's actually started as a joke, maybe as a self-criticism in America, but it ended up as basically harassment of Kazakh people. And I think we should talk about how young people are affected by this, because we as adults might be more prone to harassment and jokes, racism, etc. But when you're 16 or 17 and you move abroad, and the only thing that people actually associate you with is Borat, can actually have serious consequences on your professional life, private life, and so forth.
Right. I think Nadia, or Dr. Zhiksimbayeva, she has explained a lot about how it can affect, and especially in adoptive kids. I cannot say more about this, even though the real issue there is they're already traumatized by their childhoods, and they come to this clean slate with their adoptive parents that are very loving, that they look different, but they're still very loving. They feel like they're in the family, and yet they get bullying and harassment from their schools just because they don't fit in the society. And because they're adopted so young, they do not remember or know anything about their home country, and they don't have that self-confidence that some other people like us have. They could be crushed, literally crushed psychologically.
Anar, can I add just something as well? Like this portrayal of women in the movie, and you talked about how women should support each other in regards to this issue. I think that it's not just women. I think it's all people that are kind of feminist and supporting women's rights should kind of join this support. And I think it's quite important to support each other in such issues.
Can I just add my point of view as well to what was already covered? Thank you so much, Anar, for creating this conversation and inviting us over for this panel. Really great points made today. I actually relate and empathize with Gia and her daughter Ella, because I'm also a mother of almost 5 years old kid who goes to school. And at some point she will start representing herself, talking about her background, about her parents, the country they come from. And I do not want her to be apologetic or, ashamed of her background. So this is why I started this hashtag cancelborat movement on Twitter and Instagram. And after that, the post I shared on Instagram went like viral in a couple of days. It had a lot of probably the most of likes and reshares on my Instagram. And after that, I noticed how different movements were created and different petitions were signed. So one of those was the one that Adalet created, and the others were pretty much the same, but they had different messages. Some of them were asking to boycott the movie, and some of them were asking to hold Amazon Prime responsible for what they're doing. So I'd like to just clarify for the public that although we are all in this movement, we're a bunch of people who want, for this inequality not to happen. We're different parts of groups. We're different groups basically fighting for the same issue, and we are basically we're on the side that wants to, corporations, entertainment corporations such as Amazon Prime to be responsible for mocking, misrepresenting, and bullying an entire nation. So basically, a lot of points were already made, and I do agree with that. I just want to add a different kind of messages I started receiving after this, post I made. And there were various of messages from my Kazakh compatriots, because some of them were on our side, and some of them were actually anti, cancelborat kind of movement. But I'd like to talk about the messages I received from people from abroad, from Americans and other English-speaking non-Kazakhs, Kazakhstani people, basically. So a lot of messages were about, oh, it's just a satire, can you take a joke? It's nothing serious. It's not even about your country. It's about American, inner problems and whatsoever. But we do know that none of these American kids or American adults who are writing those comments will ever experience harassment associated with Borat, right? It's us who will be associated with this movie and etc. and made joke of. Another really hilarious comment I got was that Sacha Baron Cohen is a Jew himself. He's of Jewish background, meaning he cannot be racist. I was appalled to that. Yeah, go ahead, Jia.
Let me add to this one. And I think my daughter has something to add to this. The thing is, there's a difference. When you make jokes about widely represented community, and when you make jokes about the community that is a complete enigma, completely underrepresented. Ella, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been established that there is a large Jewish community in the US and in the West, period. They have a voice in the media. People know their history, know where they're from. People know about Israel. It's not an enigma. Kazakhstan, on the other hand, what do we have in the media? We have Borat and Borat 2, and then occasional articles about the country. But the point is we're really underrepresented. So this film does more harm than it does good. And although it's a comedy, at what cost, And there's also an inherent hypocrisy in the movie. Sacha Baron Cohen himself says he's a liberal. He puts a political agenda, a very poignant political agenda in the film. However, the film is mocking and attacking Kazakhs. Maybe that wasn't his original intention, but that's exactly what it's doing. And pulling Kazakh people into this very heated US political moment is very dangerous. I mean, he's making us look like right-wing Republicans. What does that do for our image in the United States? Are people going to come up to our children and be like, oh, do you love Trump? Or whatever, do you support Pence? Do you hate gay people and hate Jewish people? Because that's the image he's projecting in these movies. And obviously that's not true. We're all individuals and we all have our own beliefs, but Americans as a whole will, staple that image onto our people. I mean, that's like extremely harmful.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. And the other comment I remember clearly was that it was from, I think, an American teenager, if I'm not mistaken. And she was telling me, oh, we're not responsible for those ignorant people who are bullying you. Bullies will be, every time, everywhere, you will get to experience them. We're sorry about that, but do not cancel our, favorite movie or something like that. So yeah, and
that's exactly why we should make it very obvious to people who navigate through this, to know that anyone who watches it or finds it funny have some kind of dark side that's sexist, xenophobic, downright obscene, and loves pornography. It's like watching Cuties. If you watch it, most likely you're a pedophile.
So I had a question for Rahid. So the UK went from, as you said, the Paki bashing to the Pakistani British person as a mayor of London, right? In a few decades. And so my first question is, how did the South Asian community achieve this, where the community became embraced and mainstream, and the racism against them became like a taboo? And the second question is, as somebody who grew up in Britain, what kind of messages do you think should Kazakh people use to change minds of the Western audience, to change this attitude towards Borat?
I think with the South Asian community, it's just been a very slow process of engagement, and there's still huge levels of racism. And big differences between the sort of Indian community versus the Pakistani community versus the Bangladeshi community in terms of achievement at school. But I think what you're seeing is a lot of Asians have done very well at school. They've eventually broken glass ceilings inside corporations. They've gone to senior levels. If you look at the current Conservative government, it has maybe 6 or 7 Asians in the cabinet. Most of them are completely incompetent, but it doesn't matter. They and actually, almost the Home Secretary is Asian, and she is one of the most racist people you're ever going to meet against her own community or against anyone that isn't her. But I think it's been a very slow process of getting acceptance. I think there's a real struggle for Kazakhstan. As you say, you're a nation of 11 million. You're not well known around the world, and you're not in the public eye. You're not in conflict in the way that places like the Ukraine are, or what's going on in terms of Azerbaijan right now. And you haven't had big stories about you or very famous people coming out of Kazakhstan, and you can't change that overnight. I also don't think that your government doing a big press campaign about the film is going to have any impact. I think this is much more about a gradual cultural assault, almost taking Kazakh culture. And you mentioned what the ambassador had done. And I think that's what all around the world, the Kazakh embassies and consulates need to be doing, is promoting more and more Kazakh culture, encouraging Kazakh artists to come, and Kazakh theatre performances and musicians, and to just introduce them to society so that there's a deeper and broader dialogue about Kazakh culture. And I think that's the only way you do it. I don't think the Kazakh community is big enough anywhere to really even get noticed, even if all 50,000 of you in the States made it to the top in terms of politics and everything else and business. I just don't think it's a big enough number of people to even stand out. And so I think the cultural route is probably the way to go to get conversation started and to prevent a counter argument to the horrendous cultural portrayal of Kazakhstan in the films. I think you have to present the real culture.
I live and work in Los Angeles, in film industry, and my dear Kazakhs over here, they know my work. And but you're right. I mean, we do have talents. We have enormous talents, like Dimash Kudaibergen, for example, an amazing singer, known worldwide. We have Triple G, an amazing athlete, known worldwide. We have other talents, right? And they're incredible. They're one of a kind. But trust me, we're doing some work. For example, there's a movie that's coming out worldwide. It's coming out, already out in North America, called The Legend of Tamiris. It's a story about ancient queen from 6th century BCE. And it's the reason why I'm bringing it up in this discussion is to answer your question. We're doing something, right? We're trying, but it is a unfair fight, truly, because there are just very few of us over here.
The work we will be doing, and we are doing just by living our lives to the passions we choose. For example, I want to introduce Dimash today, finally joined. He is a New York Police Department officer.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you for letting me join here. I'm sorry I'm late. You know what, Anar, I agree with everything that you guys have said right now. You know, we have so much negativity right now. People are viewing us, in a funny way. And I remember when the movie came out in 2006, and I went to see the movie because, obviously it was about Kazakhstan, and I was just interested. Okay, let me just check it out, and so did my friends, and so did many others, because it was very interesting. It was something new. But at the end of the movie, obviously, a lot of people just left the movies in the middle of the movies. A lot of Jewish, Hasidic Jews that were watching the movies, they just left. They wanted their money back. I stayed just because I wanted to see what's gonna happen. I wanted to see how is he gonna portray us in his movie, and it was pretty disgusting. Ever since that day, I'll tell you, because I was in high school. I graduated high school in 2007. So for me, it was hard because I had a lot of peers who were also from Kazakhstan, and we were discriminated in many different ways. I mean, people were making fun of us, making jokes, making, these so-called quotes from the movie, which is very disturbing to us. But at the end of the day, I had to explain to them that it wasn't really about Kazakhstan. I mean, the movie wasn't even shot in Kazakhstan. It was shot in somewhere in Romania. I mean, the guy straight up lied. He paid pennies to the people who were in the movies, and he said, "Listen, I'm making a documentary," but in real life, he was just making a horrible comedy, and for a while, I think a lot of people forgot about it. And now that he's making the second movie, it's definitely going to come back and affect even more people, I feel like, because, a lot of, we live in America, so a lot of Americans don't recognize Kazakhstan for who they are. They don't know the culture. They don't know the history. Like Rohit said, we're small, we don't have that many people. We don't have that many voices that to be heard. But I organized this because I wanted to stand up for myself and stand up for my culture, my people. And maybe it wasn't a lot of people, but every time I do something, it's obviously gonna go in the media, and it's obviously gonna spread all over the media. So I wanted to do that because I wanted to stand up. I wanted to let people know that this movie is fake. Everything that he's doing is just ridiculous. And you know what? It was a great turnout, even though it was maybe less than 20 of us, but it was amazing, because I brought a guy who was playing Dombra, which is our national instrument. People were asking, wow, what kind of instrument is that? And I explained to them, listen, this is our national, this is history. This is our national instrument. I had to explain. A lot of people came out and said, listen, what is this all about? They had to Google Borat on the spot, and we explained to them, listen, Kazakhstan is a great culture. We have rich history. whatever this guy is doing right now obviously is not right for us, and we feel like as people we need to be, you know, heard. But unfortunately, it's not a lot of us. But I feel like if we all get together, especially people here in America, because you know, government is not gonna do nothing in Kazakhstan. I mean, people are not gonna do nothing in Kazakhstan about it, because I feel like people who live in America, Kazakh Americans who live here in America, are the most discriminated, because this movie is being shown here to the public, to the world, you know. So people that are in Western civilizations, they're the ones that get affected.
All right. And I think I want to point out our history, that here in the US, Borat became this comic character that's been associated with a Kazakh person. And for many years in Russia, in the Soviet Union, there is the character of Chukcha, which is an Eastern nation. They live closer to Alaska, but they've been always portrayed in a very degrading ways in jokes. And I remember I've heard them, I've read them on the paper when I was a kid. And, you know, in Kazakhstan, I have never met a Chukcha person. But I wonder how it feels for them. Because I know from articles that I've read, especially about Chukcha and other nations who live in the north, they've been erased, their culture have been erased because their kids are taken into dorms and into orphanages where they get education. They're given Russian names, and because they look differently from Russians, they would very quickly be identified as Chukcha and made fun of. And even back in the Soviet Kazakhstan, I remember my grandmothers, my mother, my dad, everyone telling me the stories of how they've been called certain names because of the ethnic background they're in. So when we say that Kazakhstan is a diverse country, we are, and there has been racism there too. And so when we come to the US, we expect freedom of speech, equal rights, and being a minority here and being mocked is very much too similar to be tolerated again. So on that note, I just want to ask all the participants to give 30-second conclusion about with your plea to the American society.
You know, to the American people, if you're gonna go watch this movie, please know that this movie is not about Kazakhstan. From beginning, this man has lied to us. From beginning, he has showed the negative points. Please do your research. Please look up Kazakhstan. It's a beautiful country with rich history and culture. Please be advised that this movie is totally just false.
I just want to point out to the American people that your culture is very dominant throughout the world, and it affects a lot of people. And we should be more conscious about what we are actually portraying and what we are actually projecting in our subconscious, and to actually more responsible and compassionate, I would say, about people we actually don't know.
Well, whoever watches this film you know, enjoys the so-called humor of it, just know you're participating in selective racism, in bullying, in harassment, and yeah, all in all, you know, racism against ethnic minority.
I just like to add that to anyone watching this movie, not only in the States, but also in Western societies like Europe and other countries, I know it's going to be on Amazon Prime, and meaning that anyone in the world can watch it. I just like to say that this movie has real victims, you know, real victims, real people who will experience harassment, bullying, misrepresentation. Most of the time, those people are women and kids who are traveling abroad, you know, ethnic Kazakhs or, you know, Kazakhstani people traveling abroad or living abroad permanently. We do not associate ourselves with this movie. It's a complete misrepresentation. It's false, bullshit movie. And if you're watching it, you have to think of, your life priorities.
Ignorance is a bliss, and so until you don't know something, you're happy. Like you can really enjoy a lot of things, a lot of works of art, a lot of performers. But then when you start learning about like their views or something, like it becomes problematic, and it's really hard for you to enjoy some things afterwards. So I think a lot of people are really just ignorant about the impact that this movie has on the Kazakh community, and they're just enjoying the movie itself. So I want to say that if you enjoy Borat, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're a bad person. But if you hear stories about this discrimination, about harassment, about people being hurt, about children crying in school, at home, then, and if after hearing all these things and you're still trying to justify it or trying to like explain it to Kazakhs how they're just imagining things, then I think you might just be callous.
I mean, just to the US audience, just don't, I guess, contribute to the hypocrisy of like spreading xenophobia. Just be aware, spread awareness, and I don't know, educate yourself about the countries whose films are mocking,
Let's be all aware what this movie is bringing, the real impact it's having on real people.
I just wanted to say that to the American people, who I have a lot of friends in America, and I love America, but you shouldn't be blind. And if someone calls this movie art actually calls to give people, as Tarkovsky said, to give people hope, to give people light, to give people something good, and creates something positive and eternal. So, and we're all connected. And if you laugh and you disturb someone with your laughter, you're laughing at yourself. So, and in order to discover real Kazakhstan, you should come and see, and you should talk to people, and you should experience it. Experiencing it directly, not through the lens of some comedian. So
I think this is 2020, a very challenging year, and Kazakhstan has lost lots of lives to this year, and America has lost lots of lives. Adding to that grief and loss and stress, just everyday life stress that we have, is cruel.
Whoever is watching this video and who shares our feelings and who wants to help, please share, please post, and we absolutely would appreciate your help. Thank you.